Hello, everyone, and welcome to this World Citizen Artist podcast, which will be exploring issues such as global peace, refugees, and the role that art music can play. Today, we are joined by the band The Durgas, and Benjamin and Christopher will be speaking to us today. My name is Willem. I've been a volunteer at WCA since 2020, and I'm also joined by Fiona as co host. So, Fiona, I can let you introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Fiona Jerry, and I'm an environmental content creator, and I'm happy to join here.
Great. I just thought I'd kick off, guys, with basically briefly covering what was your experience of growing up and interacting with music and how that interest was really sparked, but also how your interest with social issues also came into being.
We've having grown up pretty much all over the world, mostly Africa, Asia. We've always seen a lot of been surrounded by social issues, and from an early age, we've always, I think, we're embedded with concerns about social issues, and found a way as musicians to um, use music as a tool to dwell into these social issues through music. That said, we're not politicians. We use music as the platform.
Yeah. Christopher, if you wanted to.
Yeah. Basically, we saw a lot of distress, a lot of poverty, a lot of political conflicts as we grew up, and we wanted to be proactive. We happen to be all musicians, and so we use music as our platform to be engaged. Uh, engaged in the process of bringing peace and finding a way to, participate in making a change happen.
And what were the kind of musical influences you were surrounded by, and how did that influence what you started creating when when you started performing and composing?
I think we had parents that were very into music. Luckily, we had that, and we grew up with mostly the music of the '60s, and at a young age, you don't really listen to the. I mean, at least I didn't. The lyrics weren't the part of the music that I was focusing on, but just being around it as we grew older, you start to learn a little bit about the history of certain music that you listen to, and how the political side of it, and it was sort of embedded in us that music has a very strong voice. And and at one point, as we became, when we started having our playing in our first bands, you start writing songs, and you're like, well, there's nothing wrong about singing a love song, but occasionally you have an issue you might want to raise through your music, and you start to learn, or you learn how to write about peace, or you know write about anger that you might feel at a certain moment about certain issues. And you learn, I think our earlier songs, I always tell people, like, if you want to know my political issue, if you want to know the angry one, you go to our early albums when we were still young, and sort of very direct with, this is wrong or this is right. And as you progress, you realize things get more subtle and more, that you grow. Your political songs, or your music in overall starts to grow, and it's like a tool that you need to learn how to use. And yeah, that's kind of, and I think that definitely the music of the '60s was a big influence to us. The whole post-Vietnam songs. I think that was our entry to that kind of platform of music. Also, we've never sort of leaned onto one style of music. We grew up listening to a lot of African music. Um, And I think even music without words can be incredibly strong, and that's something we learned as kids in Africa, is that we didn't necessarily speak the language, but we would see the performances in a village or on a marketplace, and just the quality of the performance actually can tell you about the song without even understanding what they're actually singing about. And that's an important part, because it's not music, not it doesn't always have to have words to explain a situation. I think it can be even more powerful when the music itself expresses the situation or the social issue. So that's something, that was the mixture of those. um Although we were always more of a vocal band, stating our opinions and what. So yeah, Gary, you might want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point, that you don't, music itself, the actual music itself often speaks for itself and can hit the audience in a way that they then get inspired to, or like when you work with kids with trauma of war, etc. Sorry about all the noise here. I'm like total LA.
No, no worries.
No, it sounds like LA.
And so yeah, so it made a big it made a big you know uh, you can really make it can work with working with kids, for instance, in trauma, and that are trying to express themselves and and they are trying to express the war that's going around them, or the poverty, in their own way, and you can feel it through the music. And then of course a band like us, Benji's right, we were often, especially in our younger years, more like politically vocal. Like your songs were like, very, in a way, very crass at times, and direct in your face, but it had its effect. And now it's more subtle, it's more subliminal, not so black and white maybe. But
Well, the
yeah.
power, the power of music, I think what we've learned is you learn it not by necessarily writing a song. Like, you write a song because that's an expression of something that comes from you. But what we've learned, with years and years of touring, when you're playing in front of an audience, in like in a regular rock club or on a music festival, um, you're expressing sort of what you're trying to bring out to the world. What we've learned by at one point where we started playing, refugee camps, display, conflict zones, you're like, okay, here I'm actually in an environment where people, they don't know your band, they don't speak your language, they you don't know much about them. And suddenly we started realizing that actually sometimes the more stripped down your music was, especially when we were playing in refugee camps with young children. What, you're gonna sing some political, lyric? It doesn't actually even phase them. What they are drawn to is actually this interaction between music and them, almost like a game. And we realized the more we were doing these workshops, musical workshops, the simplicity of music is sometimes the strongest, um, as opposed to, this is my album, this is the club, I got to promote my album, and here I am on a stage in front of 1,000 people or 20 people, and I have to express. When you're in a conflict zone, those things don't always come into play. It is more, how do I actually engage through music to these people at that specific time? It might not always be you're sort of classical cliche concert. In our experience, it was more powerful of just having an acoustic guitar and doing even sometimes singing gibberish, non-lyric, like we're getting in the zigzag, something, and engage the community and the kids. And suddenly you're like in a whole different ball game. You're not in the music industry. You're not in a club environment. You're in a 1-to-1 with those kids at that specific time. And you're engaging through music. So that those are always these kind of things that come into play. Like when we were in Kosovo, we did all types of different musical shows. Some of them were standard concerts for the older audience, and we did our sort of traditional concert, and that's what people wanted to hear. Other times we're playing in a way stripped down environment where our sort of rock show, it didn't even work if we tried to. And we realized, well, we got to do something here, because we're not just trying to entertain, we're actually here for a cause. So what do you do? And those are the also that's what kept it interesting for us as musicians. We toured, for 10 years. We were playing over 200 shows a year all over the world. There's also sort of boredom. I mean, that's the type of people that we were, having traveled most of our lives. We wanted to start doing something more meaningful, perhaps is the word. Not to say that we don't enjoy playing concerts. We love playing concerts, but to fill our musical souls, we had to sort of take it one step further. And I think, playing in display for displaced people and those type, social environments, it made it very interesting for us. So we would do a regular tour, and then branch off from that tour and hit more meaningful concerts, that at least for us. And that was exciting. And that's also it was exciting for us to learn that we could use music, that we didn't just have to go to areas and talk to people. And there's many other ways you can be involved.
Yeah, it was like giving depth, addressing us more of a depth to what we had been doing beforehand. Just the purely sort of the entertaining part, getting on stage and being in a rock and roll band and touring by itself. Mostly was just to, the labels were putting us on stage and selling records, and suddenly there was a little bit more depth. We were able to reach a different kind of audience, and that gave us another motivation, because we were branching out a little bit into more depth of the situation.
Yeah, and I mean, Fiona, I don't know if you wanted to come in on this, but what was your sort of experiences, like working together? I mean, Fiona, I'll let you add to this, because I know this is something you wanted to touch upon.
Yeah, I'm actually quite interested on how is it working together as brothers? Is it actually?
Oh, it has its many sides.
That's a good question. I mean, especially when you're a band like the Durgas, because we're all, we get together, we travel intensively, all in the same bus together, we live together, and then we disperse after a tour, because we all live on different continents, actually, or even different parts of the country. Like my brother Benji is right now in Massachusetts. That's about 3,000 miles east of where I am, and then we have an older brother who plays with us. He lives on the island of Hawaii. That's another 3,000 miles even further west from where I am. And then we've got musicians in Europe, and then we've got musicians in Sri Lanka, etc. So that can be tricky. So what we do is we meet up, and then we rehearse. We we present kind of the new songs to one another, and then we go out, and yeah, it's a tricky.
But it has to answer your question, what is it like? I think there's one of the benefits of being in a band, in this case with three brothers, or playing music with three brothers, is that it becomes family, and family tends to be community. And I think, having been raised in Africa, we learned very young age the power of community. I notice it myself, now raising, two daughters that are still young, that, my God, sometimes all I wish, I was like, if I could just be in Africa right now, I would have 7 aunties that would take care of my girls, because we live in America, where it's like you're on your own. Suddenly all your projects, you can't do this, can't do that, because you got to pick up the girls, you got to make sure that, where in Africa we witness this community help. It takes a community to make a village. And I think in music it's very similar. I think when it's, I mean, bands tend to be like a family, but the true family, genetically being in a family, I think for us, the kind of touring that we also did, it made it way more easier. We had our sister was the tour manager. My mother was on tour helping babysit, Christopher's first son, who was on tour with us for many, many years. You avoid a lot of things that in a sort of classical band, where you're friends, but you're a member of a band. These things can get very tricky. How do you drag, for instance? I remember very vividly, we were on tour in Europe, and this was, I believe, like around 94, 93, 94. We were invited to do a peace concert in Sarajevo. And this is a perfect example. It's like, you might have one member who's like, there's hell no way I'm going into a war zone. And but then when you're a family, it's a very different energy, or it's a very different thing of having a family, as a family, saying, are we willing to go into a war zone and do a concert? We ended up, luckily, because we had also a kid with us on tour, we did not do that concert due to because we had American citizens in the band, and they were like, there's no way NATO K4 is going to protect these we ended up losing our entry. Turned out we were very lucky we didn't play the concert, because the night of the concert the ceasefire broke, and we met up with one of the band, Sai from France, about a year later, and they're like, oh, Subtle Plague, you guys are the guys that didn't show up. And we're like, we tried to make it, but weren't able to go. And they said, well, we were stuck 3 months in the club. So because the night of that concert, the ceasefire broke in Sarajevo, and shelling started. So they were stuck. But my point is, had we were ready to go as a family, I think had we not been family members, it would have been way more complex. Because how do you tell? It's easier for me to drag my brother into a war zone and say, you have no option, you're going. Where if I tell that to my other members in the band, I don't have that power. That's like, and I think that worked for us as a family. We were always a sort of a nomadic family. We traveled the world in a large family, and I think that translated in the way we did our music, and as a family, I mean, it has its hard parts too, but I think it worked in many ways for us.
Ironically, because we were the family part of the band was always a majority part, so we we could even make it a sort of like a democratic vote, but we always won because we were always a majority. So we got through it. We got to do our crazy tours, and I have to say we've been very lucky through the years that those places that we went to that were quite even there was some serious stuff going on, like people were displaced. We went to areas where we didn't have permission to be there officially. We could have, we've been very lucky that nothing ever happened to us. It could have turned into a real nightmare, and then people would have said, well, look at this, these guys are fools.
But
I mean,
there's also there's a common energy in a family as a whole that in a lot of times, like even later when the first time we actually went to Kosovo, we did a bunch of concerts, um, both on Serbian enclaves, Albanian side enclaves, uh, which was and I remember these type of concerts, there was a power of us being a family because I think that, a lot of even people that are in distress, I think being a family, not just like a band, but being a family, they there was a sort of, how do you say that? Like a connection that made it more comfortable for them, perhaps. They're like, oh, there's mama, there's the sons, there's, the sister. There's just a sort of a more comfortable position.
I agree with that. I think that
Uh,
also we had always kids with us, so it diffuses the situation, and it focuses off the political. It becomes the focus becomes on the human, and that's why we were there. We were there to address the humanity, that the hope, and 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 finding a way to to communicate between everybody through music, because it was sort of the universal language. So that made it that
Yeah,
it seemed
sorry.
like Benji's, yeah, it worked better, or let's say it
No,
helped being a family.
yeah, I mean, I was just going to add it when you've played in these areas where there's clearly like political tensions and perhaps actual conflict going on, can you really physically see the difference that playing music and engaging in art can
Absolutely,
make?
100%. That is something that even
Absolutely.
that surprised me. I will not. I'll bring as an example our first concert, um, actually our first bigger concert in Kosovo, which was in Mitrovica, which is a divided city that was divided during, with on one side you had the Albanians and on the other side the Serbian enclaves. They would shell at each other from both sides. We decided we were invited to through the United Nations to do a concert where they wanted to actually use music and see if this was one way, a cultural way of unifying, um, reintegrating some displaced Serbs and Albanians. My initial idea, I have to be honest, even as a musician, I was like, okay, we're gonna play a concert. Like, how is this possible? Where you have two sides of completely traumatized people who have just gone through a war, where the tension was like two pit bulls that are being held apart. Here we come in as like some unknown band. We're going to be on stage. Like, what are we going to accomplish? And the result of that concert was incredible, because for the during those 2 hours that we did the concerts, you could see in the people that they were just like, oh my God, this is a moment. Even if it doesn't last after the concert, right now there's a moment of hope, uh, just feeling together and get your mind off the realities that are around you, and just soak in happiness.
Yeah, and
you know
and in that case, it was especially interesting because these were all people that had grown up together, and they were suddenly in this war where, you know, you were either Albanian or Serbian, and but they were all from Kosovo. They had been neighbors. They had gone to school together, and so this war suddenly divided the community completely, and and then, you know, when we were invited to come in and to see if maybe music, or we also, there was a theater group that also were invited to see if that would work to engage them somehow in a non-aggressive way, and it was unbelievable. Like, people that hadn't seen each other, that had shot at each other, that had grown up together as friends, then ended up getting involved in the war coming, and then politicized their reality, and then suddenly they were against each other. Suddenly, with the music and also the theater group, they were hugging each other because they hadn't actually, they would recognize each other as neighbors, and then there was this incredible moment, and you know, because there was this common denominator. They realized there was this common denominator of we're like human beings, and this is madness. What's going on? What we're getting in, yeah.
I think another, I would like to bring up one example, that taught us the power of music as topic that we're talking about. We did a concert in Thailand one time at the Mercy Center, which was a orphanage for children living with AIDS, and it was a project that had some funding also from Richard Gere, the actor, and we were invited to play. And we were setting up our concert in the courtyard of this orphanage, and there were, I don't know, maybe 100 children sitting there who are suffering, with HIV. And we were about to start the concert, and we heard there was some child like screaming out of the up in the wards, out of one of the rooms, but like really, a painful scream. And we kind of stopped, and one of the nurses went up to this room, and there was a child that was basically laying. They already had given up hope. They were just he was going to pass any day, any hour. He just had no more strength. He couldn't walk. He wasn't eating anymore. And as the nurse came into the room, this kid was screaming that he heard the music out of the courtyard, and he wanted to be present. So she took this child, brought him down to be in this, to see the band, and to be in the music. And it was such a powerful, I still get goosebumps now every time I say this story. It was such a powerful moment for us, because here's a child who's basically, they've given up on him. They knew there's nothing more they can do. He hadn't spoken in weeks and weeks, and suddenly, through music, there was this suddenly burst of will that I want to be part of this. And this child passed away a few weeks later, and we actually wrote a song on our debut album called Passage Through the Milky Way, which was sort of dedicated to this experience. But that was one of these moments where you're like, oh my God, we've never been the type of musicians we go on stage with some sort of mission. It's not a mission. We are there to share our music. We're not politicians. We're not, the type, you need to be like this or you need to be like that. We're just sort of like, we would come into these areas as scholars, so to speak. We weren't like professional healers or we didn't know actually a lot of times what the hell we were doing. We agreed to go because we wanted to do something good without sometimes the experience of knowing what the hell was going to how it was going to turn out. And it's through the process of doing it over and over that we learned that the power of music, and also what we would get in return as musicians. It wasn't, most of the time the experiences that we got from playing, in conflict zones and refugees camps, hospitals, etc., is actually the experience they were giving us. The soul was fed, like they were feeding our soul just as much as we hope we gave them something to remember. But and we actually at one point we were toying with this idea out of these experiences. Like when we were playing in Thailand, a lot of these displaced refugees, they're all over the country, and a lot of them, like, you would be on a 4-star hotel on the beach, and there was a refugee camp right behind you. Nobody even knew, right in the in the behind, in the tucked away in the jungle behind you, but like walking distance. And we were always toying, like, what if you were a tourist and you're sitting on the beach playing guitar? If you only knew the power of, instead of sitting on the beach playing guitar, take your guitar and just walk behind there, 5-minute walk, and find this little school and do the same thing you were doing on the beach, doing it in a school. The feedback, what you're going to get sometimes is 10 times more strong than playing on a festival in front of 10,000 people. Let me tell you that these kids, you have no idea how strong, like, the joy seeing these kids interacting and having fun is actually such an amazing experience. And that's how we learned by doing these type of shows. Sometimes we didn't have a microphone. We were playing using a bamboo stick as a microphone boom, and playing out of a karaoke machine. And none of that mattered, because it has nothing to do with the technology thing. It's just the power of just performing and playing music. And
yeah, and I mean, obviously that kind of ties in with, obviously, the elephant in the room, what's going on in Ukraine at the moment.
Sure.
I mean, firstly, how have you guys been reacting to that? And secondly, do you think this is sort of an opportunity for people to sort of change their perspective on refugees? Because obviously you guys have had a very human connection there, but do you think more broadly we can change our perspectives?
Well, I think in fact it's a perfect example, and it's again, you see the political side of it, how, like, the country where we also have one of our bases is Hungary. And right now, Hungary is inundated with refugees. And only 5 years ago, they were also inundated, but they were not. The government who politicized the situation closed the borders at that point and didn't let anybody in. And in fact, did horrible things like, build a wall around Hungary, put the refugees that did dare to enter illegally into refugee camps, where they were stuck for literally years, and nobody did much about it. And now we have a situation where it's obviously bordering. The situation is bordering Hungary, and again, it's politicized because there's an election going on in Hungary. So the Hungarian autocrat leader, he opened up the borders and gave them free passage, but always reminding everybody on his daily talks that these are refugees, but as long as they're not gonna migrate and stay in Hungary, and he just wants to make sure that he gets his vote in a month from now. So, but in the meantime, you see, then the other side, the citizens of just doing everything they can, and with open arms and engaging. And there's an incredible engagement right now in Hungary. All of our friends are all involved in it, including our family. We've hosted now. I can't even count how many already have come through. Because they come for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days, and it's been now 3 weeks. So we've had a whole bunch of and it's been, yeah. I don't see the end of it yet, and it's a really horrific
I mean,
situation.
I think also right now, there's so much unknown. This is a war that's. I mean, it's been 3 weeks. I think, it's very early on to. I mean, I think we're all still kind of in shock of what's happening every day, and that my brain tends to go right now. It's like, help physically with the trauma that we're seeing right now. And I would almost ask the question to myself, where would music right now fit in? And I think it might be maybe a little early. The it's it I think there's going to be a point where I think I would love to. I'm actually, funny enough, writing. My outlet is immediately take a guitar, and I'm writing a song right now about it. But I think, like, on a human level, right now, my mind is like, God, this is so horrible. What's going on? Like, how do you physically help? So, like,
right, but you can already see, like, we have a connection there, where these artists set up in their train station because of all the kids. And
Yeah.
one of their own refugees was also, she had come over with her kids, and she's actually an art therapist, and she immediately set up camp and started to work with the kids, and the effect was immediate. The kids being able to express what's going on without really understanding the political side of it. And so I think, Benji is right. At this point, the key is to get, to organize and get money there, and food and shelter, the basic human needs. But but I can see locally, if you're there, you can immediately actually engage, and a lot of musicians are, as you can see, like, for instance, what's happening. We've seen a lot of the musicians in bomb shelters doing concerts and stuff, and so it's going on. And once again, the key, I think, is not to stay on the human side, and not to get involved in the political aspect, because we all understand there's this whole geopolitical nature of wars, which has to do with East-Western conflict, China.
That's well said, because if I were there right now, I would lean towards a performer or a musician or a helper. The last person I would want to waste my time right now is the person giving me the reasons why, the background to the political. Was it that this side that started? It's like, you're like, dude, right now, those things, to me, put them aside. We can, the history, the books. Right now, you're dealing with 3.1 million refugees. Like, focus on that. Like, I come across a lot of people that are, spending their hours and hours on the platform, social platform, giving their opinions about why the Russians did it, or they did it in history. I'm like, it actually shocks me, because I'm like, yeah, tell that to the refugees, and the same people on the other, either side, that are opposed the war. Tell them you know, do you think that they at this moment want to know who started, why they started? They want this to stop, and they don't want to see mothers being separated, you know, from their husbands, children separated from their, you know, it's, I mean, the atrocities of war, you know, that this is not the time. And like I agreed, you know, if I was locally, you know, if I was in Budapest right now, where you have the refugees, or in any city that is hosting this, yeah, I would want to go out perhaps with my guitar and play. But I there's no room for the discussion. The political discussion to me is it's almost like right
and I
now, yeah.
and I think that artists and musicians have a big role because they tend not to politicize it, because for them they're looking at the human side, because you know uh, you know it, that's it is the back to the geopolitical game theater that's going on at this point. It's killing a lot of people, and it doesn't matter. It's like, you got to stop the killing. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, you know, sorry, Christopher. I was just going to say, what almost is your guys' message to perhaps younger people who are engaged in music, engaged in art, and see what's going on in the world, but perhaps feel slightly almost alienated from the political backdrop, that sort of historical backdrop that's quite intimidating, but they do want to go out there and make a
I
difference in some sort of way.
Well, I think it's, you know, like when you're writing a song as a musician, you're writing a song. Where do your inspirations come from? It's like a well. Sometimes the well flows, sometimes the well is dry, and you just have to, you know, the well is not always flowing creatively. I mean, at least in my experience, you go through months. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, I don't even know if I still know how to play guitar. I'll never write a song again. And I think that this moment right now is an incredible moment to get inspired musically. You know, you like, you know, I mean, I'm doing it myself right now, trying to write this song, and I'm like, do words even fit to what's going on? And I stop, and I'm like, oh God, this, I can't believe I'm writing this, you know. But do write, you know, express. If music is your tool, then try to express it through that, because, you know, I'm certainly not a political expert. It's never been my thing, so I wouldn't know how to express myself. I only know music, and so I'm using it. And I think the message is like, if you're a musician, like, use it as a seed to something. It might not come out as anything, but the trying, I think is
Yeah, I mean, just out of interest, like obviously, I think certainly I feel we get a very sort of Western perspective on the whole situation in Ukraine. But I was wondering from sort of Fiona, from the aspect of like youth activists, young people in Kenya, how that's been going down and how that's been reacted to.
Come again?
I was saying, I think the experience or certainly how we've been receiving information from Ukraine is suddenly all the focus is on there because it's in Europe. It's a very Western centric perspective. So I was just curious how young people and activists have been reacting to it in Kenya.
Yeah, there is so much focus on it because in Kenya, there are speculations that Russia is one of the top suppliers of a few things, and this is why some of the things in Kenya are actually going high, like the prices of energy, the prices of cooking oil, because the sunflower comes from Russia. There is a lot of interest in the scene, and also that comes with another question for you, Benji and Christopher. You've talked about Africa, listening to African music and interacting with African communities. Have you, by any chance, uh, come across the language barrier or the cultural barrier, or how exactly Africans view the whites? So, have you come across such challenges when it comes to Africa?
um we grew, I mean, we were raised in Africa, not in the luckily not in the sort of typical um, way, so to speak, that most foreigners or Europeans experienced Africa. We really, my due to my parents' type of work, we really lived in real sort of an African environment. Um, and that said, being musicians, we were always drawn to the music and the arts and the family, the community, because we were raised. That's a whole bigger story, but we were raised very as a big family. There was a lot of kids in our family. There were multiple parents in our family all living together, and I think that the African, the whole way of Africa very influenced our family. We were very influenced by the African traditions. And one thing, as musicians, I always, a lot of times I on stage, I'll sing multiple little tiny phrases, a little bit of Swahili, a little bit of Wolof and Bambara. I don't speak. I mean, when we were kids, we spoke Swahili, but we lost it. But I know a little bit, and I sing it on stage. And afterwards, people come to me and they go, "Oh, it's amazing how you sing African." I'm like, "I sing African? No, I don't sing African. I know 4 lines, but I express it the way I heard it, and not even understanding what I was hearing." And that's the for me, the one thing Africa taught me is the sounds, the energy, just the way can influence you. And if you can express it the way you perceived it, that's what I try to do on stage. I don't want to just sound like, oh, I'm this type of musician, American country or reggae or thing. I want to express my childhood and my experience, and that's kind of what the Durgas has always been in terms of the sound of our music. It's sort of like our experiences in Eastern Europe, in Africa, in Asia. We try to find it in our music and express it in our music. And the African part is a very, very big part in the Durgas, because we spent so many years. And I have to say, one of my strongest influences in music is African music. And the language, even though we don't speak the language, it's embedded. The sounds are embedded in me as a singer. I hear it when I'm singing, but I'm not even singing the language, but I express it the way. And that's what I found so amazing in Africa in its music is that it's not always uh, a song, a singer songwriter song, that you go on the market and you hear this music that is just so incredible, and you're like, tomorrow it's going to sound different because of who's around and who's participating. And so it's a very, very sort of natural communal sound that it's not this format of music. It's an expression of every day. It's like a well of music. I hope I answered that question. I don't know if I probably kind of drifted off your.
Yes, you did. Thank you.
No, I think that's a really great note to finish on, Benji. I know Christopher's just dropped out, but I just want to say, perhaps he's back. Hi, Christopher. I was just saying that was a really great note to finish on. I wonder if you guys basically had a takeaway message for anyone watching who's sort of intimidated by what's going on around the world, but like I said, just want to make a difference.
I think I would like to say, we've been. It's such an honor to participate with World Citizen Artists. It's such an important platform, and we've been involved on an ongoing basis now. I don't even know how long, but for quite a while. And I just want to say that again, like, as an artist, even even doing this much little bit is a lot. And it's almost like peace is not cheap. It's not profitable. It's not that's the reality of it. And it's like something we've always, we're not rich musicians. We've never made money off our music. We paint houses so that we can go out and do the work we do. But the power of music and the reward you get from being engaged with either a message of hope or a message of peace is rewarding. And that's what we seek as musicians. And so my message is find, outlets like World Citizen Artists to be engaged for a better planet for our kids, and even if it's just tiny bit is more.
It's a great message. Christopher, did you have something to add? Because I think that's a really fantastic summary.
I missed some of it because I got disconnected, but I mean, that's the message. It's I think that it's always, well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for getting involved in this, but I think that, are we coming to the end? What
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what Benji was saying, I caught the very last part of it. Is like, like there is, if you're an artist, a musician, you've got a huge platform now, and thanks to social media, you even have it's incredible what we can do now. Like even what we're doing right now here from this Zoom call from Kenya to England, Massachusetts, and LA. It still blows my mind in that way. So there is a huge platform, and World Citizens Artists is a fantastic platform for just that, and it's open to everybody, and it's open to all kinds of artists. So I think engaging with and keeping it. I always say, like, keeping it unpolitical. Everything is political in some means, but like the dogma behind it, but like, just staying focused on the human side. Right now the Russians are getting a horrible rap as one big group, like, oh, the Russians, once again, like they're the Cold War. But, like we can see there's an incredible amount of, frustration within the citizens of Russia right now, what's going on, and keeping that focus. Like, it's, we're all human beings, we're all alike, and we all want peace, and we all want to just, bring up our children, do our whatever it is we're doing, whether we're musicians or sculptors or painters. Like my mom is a painter, filmmaker. So, and we all do what we can, and in the meantime to engage. And there's always ways to engage. And I know, you live in Kenya, Fiona, and it's a real pleasure to meet you. I hope we can meet you one time in person. Doing what you're doing is, like you were talking about the prices going up and down and how it's affecting already Kenya. Yeah, we're all affected. It's like a ripple effect, of all wars. What's happening in Syria, what's happening in Iraq and Afghanistan and Palestine and Israel, and we're at the end of the day we're all, and so we've got an easy job. We can take the politics a little bit aside and just engage in the human, and then we realize we're all human beings. It's not so complicated, actually. It's it's kind of the easiest part. Of it all, So keep like Michael Franti says so well, in that, be human. Like, it's a verb.
I think that's a fantastic note to end it on. I just want to say a big thank you to Christopher and Benji for joining, of course. Thank you.
Thank you for having
Fiona
us.
And
thank you.
Thanks for everyone there. Thanks for everybody who tuned in today.
Thank you.
With a gun in his hand, with a barrel pointing at the wall.